I'm Dr. Akeranda Smith. I'm a life coach, professor, and a thought leader.
Hi, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Dr. Ike, and go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, and let's jump right in. So this week I wanted to talk about raising tender women. And what made me think about this subject was I recently had this really great conversation with my daughter. She's 17. She works part-time. Shout out to Canada the Great. And she recently had an incident that happened at her job. She's a barista. She works part-time. And one day she called me and she was panicking. And she said, "Mom, I need to talk to you right now." She said, "Something just happened and I want to know if I handled it properly." So I'm like, "Go ahead, give it to me." So she and a coworker of hers, actually two coworkers of hers, one was a male and one was a female, was having a conversation about HBCUs. And everybody was telling their opinion about the stereotypes around HBCUs. She told her opinion. I think the other young lady told her opinion, so the gentleman. So at some point, right, this was a conversation where everybody was sharing their opinion. My daughter said something, I can't remember exactly what she said, about the HBCU, but it was something on the lines of about wanting to go to a co-ed HBCU rather than an all-girls one. And the gentleman who didn't know my daughter, he was new to even the establishment where she worked, he looked at her and he said, "I don't know why you feel that way about said HBCU. You look like you would be boy crazy anyway," right? The nerve. So my daughter said she was seething. She said it took her by surprise. And she said she had to immediately regroup herself. So she removed herself from the conversation and she went to the back of the room, and then she came back and she just immediately started working. The gentleman that had made the comment looked at my daughter and was like, "Is there a problem, Canada?" And she was like, "No." She said, "You crossed the boundary." So he decided he wanted to take the conversation offline and he wanted to go to the back of the store. And so when he went to the back of the store, he said, "Do we have a problem?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "You don't know me well enough to tell me what you think about me and me being boy crazy." She said, "It was rude and it was disrespectful." She said, "And you crossed the boundary." She said, "And don't ever do that again." And so he was shocked. And of course, she said that he was upset, but he understood. But after that day, for the rest of the day, he had an attitude with her, but he didn't disrespect her anymore. So she was asking my opinion. She said, "Mom, did I handle it correctly?" No, actually what she really said before she set the story up, she said, "You know what, Mom?" She said, "I'm realizing that people think that they can take advantage of me." And I kind of chuckled to myself because what I felt in that moment was my daughter was learning something at 17 that I had to learn as an adult. And so she told me the story, and after she told me the story, she said, "Did I handle it properly?" I said, "Honey," I said, "you handled it perfectly." I said, because had you let it slide, and I said, and he would have did it again, because he would have. I said, then if you would have addressed it, he would have felt like, what is the big deal? Because I've done this before. I said, so at that moment, you were teaching him how to treat you. And so when I was thinking about how she handled that situation, it took me back to my childhood and how so much of my childhood, I didn't know how to stand up for myself. And I often felt like I was bullied. And I was bullied for the same reason that my daughter said to me. She said, "I believe that people think that they can take advantage of me." Because I'm going to tell you, my daughter, she is bubbly. She's loving. She's charismatic. She's not the typical proverbial mean girl. She's immediately going to be the girl that's going to embrace you. She's going to find a friend everywhere she goes. And that Black girl, if she's not careful and confident enough about who she is, will definitely be taken advantage of. And what I realized is that as I had been raising her, what I was showing her was how to be loving and not allow herself to be taken advantage of, right? Because oftentimes we think that being tender means being a pushover, and it's not. Being tender can mean that you can be loving and firm simultaneously. And as I was thinking back on that story that my daughter shared with me, I realized that all I saw from my mom as a child was firm. My mom was no nonsense. She wasn't vulnerable. I can count the times on my hand that I ever saw my mom cry. What I realized by being raised by that kind of mom, it taught me how to be afraid to stand up for myself. And when you're afraid to stand up for yourself, you become a mean girl. You are ready to attack people for sometimes things that are not necessarily meant to harm you, but because you are so afraid of being taken advantage of, everything is a thing. And that's what I realized. I never shall forget a conversation I had with a childhood friend. I had went to visit her one time because we had reconnected. And I remember her laying across my bed when I went to visit her. And she looked at me and she said, I'm so happy that you came to see me. She said, can I be honest with you? I said, of course. I mean, we're adults. She looked at me and she said, when you were a kid, you were mean. And I kind of chuckled. And I laughed because what I had to show her was my lived experience. And my lived experience was, honey, I grew up with a mother who was no nonsense. There was no room for me to be loving. I was always trying to defend myself as a child. See, you had self-efficacy. You grew up with a mother and a father who were married, who loved each other, who loved you and your brothers. I grew up with a single mother. She had a whole nother set of worries that your mother and dad evenly shared amongst each other that my mom had to worry about all by herself. And not to mention, my dad wasn't in my life and nowhere present. And so when I gave her that backdrop, she said, oh, I never knew that. And I lovingly told her, you had no reason to know it because that wasn't your lived experience. So you were allowed to be loving and tender. I wasn't. I often lived in fear of a mother that would get on me if I did anything wrong, and fear of defending myself in environments when I knew that nobody had my back, right? And so what I understand is, as a mother now, I wanted to raise my daughter to be soft and loving. I didn't want her to be strong because I knew by making her soft and loving, and most importantly, sure of herself, that she would be strong. And I think that there's this narrative that we have to raise young girls to be strong because, especially if they're Black, because the world will take advantage of them. And I feel like that is a very harsh upbringing for a child that is going out into the world to be a woman and needing to be able to love herself and allow other people to love her. It breeds fear. And it doesn't really lend much room for her to trust that people will be good to her because she has already been conditioned that the world is out to get her. And so when my daughter brought that story to me, I was so proud of her. And she went to work the next day, happy as she always is, and didn't skip a beat. It didn't make her insecure. It didn't make her feel like now I have to be in fear. And most importantly, she didn't lose herself behind an incident that could have ultimately made her feel really intimidated. And so we have to raise women to belong to themselves first. And that way, we will inevitably raise tender women. Two things can exist. You can be strong, but you can also be loving, caring, compassionate, kind, and all the things. And still know that you don't take no mess and that you are not going to allow anyone to take advantage of you because you know that you don't have to. So, tell me about your experience growing up as a woman. And if you have a daughter, tell me how you are raising your daughter to belong to herself first so that she too can grow up to be a tender woman. One thing I know for sure is that I don't want to be strong. I want to be soft and I want to be loving. As always, thank you for watching and see you next time.